On a Tuesday in October, Aaliyah Monroe went looking for a bathroom. She found a murder instead. 6 weeks later, she was in a beige duplex in Akron, Ohio, arguing with a former Korean Mafia boss about a thermostat. This is the story of what happened in between, and what happened because of it. The thermostat said 64 degrees. A hand in a silk sleep set reached for it, turned it to 80. Somewhere off screen, a page turned. Before we go any further, there are 3 things that need to happen right now. First, if you have never heard this story before today, hit subscribe because stories exactly like this one live on this channel, and they will keep coming as long as you keep showing up. Second, share this video before you finish it. That sounds backwards. Do it anyway. By the end you are going to want someone to watch this with you, and if you wait until it is over you will forget. Third, comment below right now just the words room 4B so it is known you are here. Every single comment gets read. Now, let's go. Aaliyah Monroe was 28 years old and she had a plan for everything. She grew up in College Park, Atlanta. Not the nice part, the part that made her sharp. The part where you learned early that the world did not hand you anything, and if you wanted something you built it yourself with whatever was available, which in her case was a razor mind, an absolute refusal to accept inefficiency, and 4 years of Waffle House double shifts that put her through accounting school while most people her age were sleeping in on Saturdays. By 28 she had the career, the apartment, the 5-year plan mapped out on a spreadsheet that she updated quarterly. She was the kind of woman who showed up to a crisis fully dressed and already annoyed. The kind of woman who gave everyone else the best advice and never once took it herself. The kind of woman who had a face. A perfect, composed, I'm fine face. That fooled absolutely everyone. She also talked to herself. Full conversations. Complete arguments with both sides represented. She was aware this was unhinged. She continued to do it. On the Tuesday in October that changed everything. She was working late at her firm. Her boss was in a back conference room. A city councilman had come by for what was described on the calendar as a consultation. She needed the bathroom. The bathroom was at the end of the hall. She turned the wrong way. She found the wrong room. She saw something that nobody in that room expected anybody to see. A deal. A transfer. A man who had come into the meeting alive who was not going to leave that way. She stood in the doorway for 3 seconds that felt like a year, and then she backed away very slowly and found the actual bathroom and stood over the sink with the water running and looked at herself in the mirror and said, out loud, to her own reflection, okay. She said it 11 times. She counted. She went home. She called the FBI from a burner phone she bought at a gas station because she had seen enough television to know that was the correct move. She told them everything. She told them in organized, precise, chronological order with specific details because she was an accountant and that was how her brain worked even when her hands were shaking. 3 days later, 2 agents arrived at her apartment with suits and very neutral expressions and the information that yes, what she had seen was exactly what she thought it was. And yes, she was going to need to testify, and yes, in the meantime, she was going to need to come with them. She packed 1 suitcase. She left her plants with her neighbor. She did not cry until she was in the car, and even then it was just her eyes, briefly, privately, while she looked out the window at Atlanta moving past her like a life she was watching from the outside. She arrived at a federal safe house in Akron, Ohio on a Wednesday afternoon. It was a beige duplex on a quiet street that smelled like carpet cleaner and something that could only be described as the architectural equivalent of giving up. Her handler was a man named Agent Kowalski, 52, Cleveland, the kind of tired that lives in the eyes, counting down to retirement like a man with a calendar and a specific grievance against every day that wasn't the last one. You'll be sharing the space, Kowalski told her, in the tone of someone delivering mildly bad weather news. Sharing with who? Aaliyah said. Kowalski opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. His name is J10, he said. He's 32. He's been here 6 months. He's cooperative. Cooperative. Aaliyah repeated. Very cooperative, Kowalski said, with the energy of a man who had learned not to elaborate. She found out why on her first morning. She came downstairs at 8:30 in the morning, which was the earliest her body was capable of producing a functional human being, and the kitchen smelled like something that had been cooking since before the sun had any business being up. A man was standing at the stove with his back to her. Tall, still, moving through the kitchen with the quiet precision of someone who had an exact system and had never once questioned whether the system was correct. He turned around when she came in. J10 had the kind of face that looked like it had made several significant decisions and was done being surprised by things. Dark eyes that registered everything and commented on nothing. The posture of someone who had spent years in rooms where posture communicated survival. He looked at her bonnet, looked back at his stove. "There is soup," he said. "It is 8:30 in the morning," Aaliyah said. "It has been on since 6, he said. In the tone of someone providing a clarification that had not been requested, she stared at him. He stirred the soup. Neither of them spoke for 4 full minutes. She counted those 2. This was how she met J10, former enforcer, former boss of one of Seoul's most feared criminal syndicates, current resident of room 4B, Akron, Ohio. A man who had, by his own calculation, joined the syndicate at 19 not out of ambition but out of math. His family had lost everything when he was 12. The syndicate was the only equation that added up. By 32 he was running operations across 3 countries, keeping a ledger in his head that would have made any forensic accountant professionally emotional. Managing 12 people. Making decisions that other people's lives depended on. And he was exhausted. Not morally exhausted. Practically. Violence, he had discovered over 12 years, was enormously inefficient. There was always fallout. Always collateral. Always a problem that the solution created 3 more of. He kept looking for a better system. There wasn't one. So he left. He cut a deal with the FBI. 6 months in a safe house. Full cooperation. Testimony. Then a clean identity and a quiet life and the specific ordinary Tuesday he had been constructing in his imagination for years. A market, real groceries. A kitchen that belonged to him. Work that used numbers legitimately. Evenings with a book. That was the plan. The plan did not account for the woman in the silk sleep set and the bonnet standing in his kitchen at 8:30 in the morning looking at his soup like it had personally offended her. "Do you want some?" he said. "I want cereal," she said. He looked at her. There was something in his expression that was not quite judgment but was certainly in the neighborhood. "I bought cereal," he said. "It is bad. I moved it to the back of the cabinet." The silence that followed had a specific texture. "You moved my cereal," she said very carefully. "To the back of the cabinet. It has marshmallows. I like marshmallows." He slid a bowl of soup across the counter. She stared at it. Something happened in her face that she would have strongly denied if asked about it later. She pulled out the stool. She sat down. She picked up the spoon. She ate 3 bites before she said anything, and when she said something it was quiet, and slightly reluctant, and completely honest. "This is actually really good." "No," he said, already washing the pot. She finished the whole bowl. She went back upstairs without thanking him. He did not appear to require thanks. The pot was clean before she reached the top of the stairs. This was day 6. The soup came every morning after that. She never acknowledged the pattern. Neither did he. But day 3 was the thermostat. Aaliyah woke up on day 3 and the house was 64 degrees. She was wearing a silk sleep set because she was a person with standards even in federal witness protection, and 64 degrees in a silk sleep set was not a temperature. It was a threat. It was a statement. It was 64 degrees and somebody had made it that way deliberately and she was going to find out who. She already knew who. She walked downstairs and stood in front of the thermostat like a woman preparing to make a decision she could not take back. She turned it to 74. Out of principle. Out of Atlanta blood that did not understand cold as a lifestyle choice. Out of the specific energy of a woman who had survived too much to also survive hypothermia in Ohio. She made coffee. She sat down. She felt, for the first time in 3 days, like a human being with a body temperature. 20 minutes later, J1 came downstairs. He walked to the thermostat the way a man walks when he already knows something is wrong and has already decided what to do about it. He looked at 74 degrees. He said nothing. He turned it back to 65. Aaliyah put down her coffee cup. She walked to the thermostat. She turned it to 76. She walked back to the kitchen. She picked up her coffee. He turned it to 64. She turned it to 80 and stood in front of it with her arms crossed and her entire body language communicating that she was prepared to stand there for the rest of the day if necessary. He looked at her. He looked at the thermostat. He went upstairs. She thought she had won. He came back downstairs wearing a light cardigan. He sat in the armchair. He opened his book. He turned a page with the complete, unhurried calm of a man who had been in rooms where the stakes were considerably higher than this and had survived all of them. She was so angry she could not see straight. "You are doing this on purpose," she said. "I am reading," he said, turning another page. "It is 64 degrees in this house. Or it was before I fixed it." "It was," he said. "Now it is 80. You should open a window." "I will open you." He looked up from his book. Slowly, with the expression of a man genuinely processing the sentence that had just been said to him. "That doesn't mean anything," he said. Aaliyah looked at the ceiling. She looked at it for a long time. She appeared to be having a private conversation with God about the specific nature of her circumstances and whether she had done something in a previous life to deserve Ohio and a man in a cardigan. "Lord," she said to the ceiling. "Why?" The ceiling did not answer. J1 turned another page. Kowalski arrived at 11 that morning for a routine check-in and walked into a house that was 80 degrees in October. He stood in the doorway. He looked at the thermostat. He looked at Aaliyah, who was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed. He looked at J1, who was still reading. He sweated through his shirt in approximately 30 seconds. He set the thermostat to 70 degrees. He reached into his pocket, produced a small tool, and physically removed the dial. He put the dial in his jacket pocket. He looked at both of them. Neither of them said anything to him. They were looking at each other. "Great," Kowalski said, to no one in particular. "Great." He left. They were both furious at Kowalski. This was the first thing they had ever agreed on. The story notes this carefully. Neither of them noticed. The thermostat war evolved into the remote control war by day 8, which Aaliyah would later describe to her best friend Nia as the most psychologically sophisticated conflict she had ever been involved in, and she had once mediated a partnership dispute between two accountants who had been married to each other. Aaliyah had a sacred evening routine. 7 o'clock, Real Housewives. 8 o'clock, whatever she wanted. 9 o'clock, entirely her business. This routine had survived tax season, a bad situationship that lasted 8 months longer than it should have, and a root canal that her dentist had described as complicated in a tone that still haunted her. The routine was not flexible. The routine was infrastructure. J1 did not understand reality television. He had watched approximately 14 minutes of The Real Housewives before he began asking questions. Not casual questions. Structural questions. Questions about the format as a genre and what it was attempting to accomplish and whether the participants were aware they were being recorded. "Why are they screaming?" he said on minute 3. "Because Portia lied about the... Just watch. This woman flipped a table. Iconic. Is she okay? She's fine, she does this every... Someone should check on her. J1, I will check on you if you don't." He started watching Korean baseball the moment she left the room. She returned to find men in helmets moving around a diamond and the Real Housewives gone like they had never existed. She picked up the remote. He put one finger on it without looking up from his phone. Not grabbing it. Just a finger. One finger, resting. The implication was enormous. She pulled. He held. The television stayed on Korean baseball for 45 minutes because Aaliyah Monroe had decided she was not going to be the one who let go first, and she maintained this position even after her arm started to ache because some things were about principle and this was about principle. She never admitted the arm part. The sticky notes began the following evening. Aaliyah found a pad in the kitchen drawer and wrote in her clearest, most emphatic handwriting. Mine, 7 to 10 p.m. Non-negotiable. God is watching. She stuck it directly on the remote. The next morning, the remote had a second sticky note next to hers. One word in neat, precise handwriting. Noted. He had changed the channel. She wrote, "I will report you to the FBI." He wrote, "They already know me." She stood in the kitchen holding the remote, reading his response, and had absolutely nothing to say. Not because she was defeated, but because it was possibly the most correct thing anyone had ever written on a sticky note, and she could not find a single angle of attack, and this infuriated her more than the original problem. It haunted her for 3 days. The kitchen was its own separate war with its own separate rules. Jae-won cooked like the kitchen was a sacred space and he was its ordained priest. Knives faced a specific direction, always the same direction, for reasons he considered self-evident and had never explained. Mise en place was not a technique. It was a moral position. He had reorganized the spice rack on day 2 by flavor profile and considered the matter permanently resolved. Aaliyah also cooked. Loudly. Joyfully. With complete disregard for knife direction, mise en place, or the feelings of anyone who had opinions about those things. She cooked the way she did most things, with full commitment and zero apology. She made boxed macaroni and cheese one evening. The blue box. With hot sauce because that was how it was done and how it had always been done and how it would continue to be done until she stopped being alive. Jae-won appeared in the kitchen doorway while she was stirring and stood there with the expression of a man watching something he could not look away from even though it was painful. "That is powdered cheese," he said. "Correct," she said. "From a packet. You want some?" A long pause. A very specific kind of pause. "No," he said. "More for me," she said, adding hot sauce. He said something then, quietly, mostly to himself, that he clearly did not intend to be heard. "This is a crime. I heard that." He did not apologize. She did not stop making it. They had reached, in their own specific way, an understanding. The real explosion came when she used his good pan for scrambled eggs and left it to soak. It was a good pan. A serious pan. The kind of pan that someone had an actual relationship with. She knew this when she used it and she did it anyway because it was the available pan and she needed eggs and she was not going to let his organizational system govern her breakfast. He found it soaking at 6 in the morning. He stood at the sink for a moment. He did not yell. He did not say anything. He cleaned it with the focused, deliberate energy of a man processing a genuine grievance through the medium of kitchen maintenance. The silence was so specific and so loud that Aaliyah, coming downstairs 20 minutes later, apologized twice before she had fully processed why. She retaliated by reorganizing the spice rack alphabetically. He reorganized it by flavor profile. She moved it back to alphabetical. He reorganized it by flavor profile. This continued for 11 days. Kowalski noticed on his 3rd visit. He said nothing. He sat down. He accepted the coffee that Jae-won made without being asked. He looked like a man who had made a decision to survive the remaining weeks of this assignment without engaging with anything that was not strictly within his federal jurisdiction. The spice rack was not within his federal jurisdiction. He drank the coffee. He left. And underneath all of it, underneath every argument about temperature and cereal and the correct direction for knives, something else was happening. Something neither of them had a name for yet and neither of them was going to be the first to name. Jae-won noticed when Aaliyah hadn't slept before she said a word. Aaliyah knew his kitchen schedule well enough to time her mornings around it without realizing she was doing it. They had built, without planning to, without deciding to, without either of them signing off on it, a language. Small and specific and entirely their own. The story knew what it was. They didn't. Not yet. Week 3 arrived with the specific weight of something that had been coming for a while. Aaliyah Monroe was many things. Sharp, funny, controlled, relentlessly competent. But she was also, underneath all of it, an accountant. And accountants notice patterns. They notice when numbers don't add up. They notice when a column of figures looks clean on the surface but something in the underlying data has been arranged rather than arrived at naturally. She had been thinking about the arrangement for days. She was lying on her bed one afternoon with the publicly available court documents she'd asked Kowalski to print for her, because she was going to testify and she was going to know exactly what she was testifying about and nobody was going to walk her into a courtroom unprepared. She was reading about the councilman, his business dealings, his network of associates, the companies he had a stake in, the international connections that were listed in the documents in the careful, bloodless language of federal charges. She read one name. She read it again. She sat up. She went downstairs with the documents in her hand and stood in the kitchen doorway. Jae-won was at the stove. He registered her presence, registered the papers, registered the specific quality of the silence she had arrived with, and turned the heat down on whatever he was making without saying anything. "The councilman I'm testifying against," she said. "His financial network. These shell companies. She put the documents on the counter and pointed. This is the same network that your syndicate supplied through, isn't it? J1 looked at the documents. He looked at the specific line she was pointing to. He said nothing for a long moment. Yes, he said. The FBI knew this, she said. It was not a question. Yes, he said. They put us together deliberately, hoping we'd talk, hoping we'd compare notes without being directly asked, hoping proximity would do what a formal interrogation couldn't. Yes, he said. The word landed 3 times in a row like a verdict. Aaliyah stepped back from the counter. She looked at the ceiling, the same ceiling she had looked at during the thermostat war, the one that had never once offered her anything useful. She pressed both hands flat on the counter and breathed. You knew, she said. From the beginning. I suspected, he said. You suspected and you didn't. What would I have told you? He said, not defensively. Genuinely. That the federal agency housing us had an agenda? You already knew that. You called them yourself. That is not the same as being used. We are witnesses, he said. In witness protection. We were always being used. The soup did not change that. She laughed then, unexpectedly, the way you laugh when something is not funny but the alternative is something you are not ready for. Then she stopped laughing. Then she looked at him. The soup, she repeated. The soup, he confirmed, in the tone of someone standing behind what they said. She looked at the documents. She looked at him. She thought about the sticky notes and the thermostat and the 6:30 mornings and the jollof rice he had made last Tuesday for no particular reason, a culinary exercise, nothing more, nothing relevant. She thought about all the ways the proximity had been manufactured and all the ways what grew inside it had not been. He didn't defend himself. He didn't make a speech. He turned back to the stove, reduced the heat further, and 2 minutes later placed a cup of tea next to her on the counter without asking whether she wanted it. She stared at the tea. She looked at his back. She picked up the cup. Neither of them mentioned it again. But something had been named. Not between them, they were nowhere near naming things between them yet, but inside each of them, privately, in the part of a person that keeps honest accounts even when the person isn't ready to look at the ledger. The safe house was still manufactured proximity. The tea was entirely his. Week 3 also contained the night of the power outage. This is the night the story turns on. Not the thermostat war. Not the jollof rice. Not the hallway. This night. It was a Thursday. The power went out at 8 in the evening. A storm that had been promising itself all day finally arrived. Kowalski was unreachable, which surprised no one because Kowalski was in Cleveland and had a policy of being unreachable after 7 on weekdays that was never spoken but consistently demonstrated. Aaliyah found 2 candles in the kitchen drawer and a box of matches and brought them to the living room. J1 appeared shortly after with takeout containers from the one restaurant within delivery range that had not taken the weather as a professional excuse. They sat on the living room floor because the couch felt too formal for candles and takeout during a power outage, and neither of them acknowledged that sitting on the floor together was a different kind of proximity than the kitchen counter or the separate ends of the couch. They ate. The storm made noise outside. The candle did its work. Aaliyah went quiet at some point. Not her regular quiet. Not the strategic, composed, everything is fine quiet that she deployed as a primary weapon. Her wrong quiet. The kind that happened when the management system failed. She was looking at the candle and she had stopped eating and she had been still for longer than she was ever still, and J1 noticed on minute 1. Said nothing and waited. He was very good at waiting. She started talking eventually. Not to him, really. More to the room. To the dark around the edges of the candle. She said she wasn't scared of testifying. She wanted to be clear about that. She had never been afraid of the right thing to do, and testifying was the right thing to do, and she knew it and she was going to do it. She said what scared her was the after. Going back to a life that would look exactly like her life looked before. The apartment. The career. The 5-year plan updated quarterly on a spreadsheet. Except now she would be carrying something enormous and invisible and unshared. She would know what she had done. She would know what it had cost. And nobody. Not her colleagues, not her neighbors, not the people she would sit across from in meetings. None of them would ever know that she had been brave enough to blow up the only life she had built in order to do the right thing. Nobody will know I was brave, she said. Not to him. Just to the dark. The room held the words for a long time. Then Jae-won said, in his careful, precise English, with the unhurried certainty of someone who had thought about it and was certain, "I know. I will know." She looked at him. He looked back. There was nothing on his face that was performance. There was nothing in his voice that was comfort offered as a social obligation. He was just telling her something true about the state of things as he understood them. She laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was such an unexpectedly, disarmingly sincere thing to say, and she was not ready for it, and the laugh was the only response her body had available on short notice. He looked almost offended that she laughed, which made her laugh harder, and this time it was different. It was half tears and half something real, and the tears did not feel like weakness. They felt like a pressure valve, and the laughter felt like breathing. He closed his book. He did not usually close his book. He watched her come back from wherever she had been, and he did not try to meet her there, and he did not try to pull her out, and he did not say anything else. He just stayed, present and quiet and completely still, the way he was always still, in the way that had felt unnerving when she first arrived and now felt, without her permission, like something else. After a while he said, "Your friend is okay?" "Yeah," she said. "For now." "Then right now is enough," he said. She stared at him with the expression of a woman encountering something she had no existing category for. "You can't just say things like that," she said. "Why?" "Because it makes it hard to be mad at you." "You can still be mad about the thermostat," he said, and picked his book back up. She sat with that for a moment. Then a small smile arrived on her face, the private kind, the kind that wasn't managed. "I am," she said. "Don't think I forgot." "I know you didn't," he said. Neither of them mentioned the conversation again. But both of them carried it carefully, privately, in the way you carry something fragile that you are not ready to put down yet and not ready to examine either, so you just keep moving and hold it close and hope you don't drop it. That was the night they became friends. Everything after was the consequence of that. Weeks 4 and 5 had a different quality. The arguments continued, the spice rack, the remote, the specific brand of ramen that Jae-won had strong opinions about and stated as universal fact regardless of whether opinions had been solicited. The sticky note war evolved. There were now sticky notes on the coffee maker, the back of his book, the bathroom mirror, the kitchen cabinet above the good pan that Aaliyah was no longer allowed to use without a formal verbal acknowledgement that it was the good pan. The sticky notes had gotten funnier, more specific, the kind of funny that only works if you have been paying attention to someone for weeks. But something had shifted underneath the comedy and both of them were pretending with great commitment that it hadn't. Aaliyah started knowing where Jae-won was in the house at all times. Not in any way she would have described as significant. He was in the kitchen. She knew this before she got to the bottom of the stairs. He was on the back step with his tea. She knew this before she looked. He was in the armchair by the window with his book. She registered his location the way you register weather as a background condition of the environment. She did not examine this. There was nothing to examine. It was just spatial awareness. Totally normal. Jae-won made jollof rice on a Tuesday in week 4. He made it because he had been, for reasons entirely unrelated to anything, doing some reading about West African cuisine and its diasporic adaptations and the Atlanta-specific preparation that had been documented in a cookbook he had found referenced in an article and then tracked down through a request to Kowalski that Kowalski had processed with the expression of a man who had genuinely stopped trying to understand his job. It was a culinary exercise. He researched everything. This meant nothing. Aaliyah came downstairs and stopped at the bottom of the steps because the smell hit her before she was ready for it. She stood very still. She looked at him standing at the stove with his back to her, and the specific, perfect smell of her favorite food, filling a beige duplex in Akron, Ohio. "Is that?" she started. "How do you even know what that smells like?" "I researched," he said, plating it. "You researched jollof rice." "I research everything." She sat down slowly, in the way a person sits when they are trying to sit casually and it is not coming out casual. He set the bowl in front of her and went back to the stove. She looked at the bowl. She looked at his back. Something was happening in her chest that she identified as indigestion and filed away. "It may not be correct," he said, without turning around. "The recipe had regional variations." "J1, she said. "The tomato base in particular." "Stop talking," she said. "Is it?" I said stop talking. She took a bite, then another. Then she pulled the bowl closer and ate with the focused commitment of someone who has been handed exactly what they needed before they were ready to know they needed it. He read his book. His ears were slightly red. Neither of them acknowledged this. She ate the entire pot. 2 days later, she called Nia on the secure line. Nia was her best friend from College Park, the one person in Atlanta who knew where she was, cleared by the FBI after a background check that Nia had apparently found thrilling. The walls of the safe house were thin in the way that government-contracted construction is always thin. Not obviously thin, just thin enough that sound traveled with more ambition than architecture should permit. Aaliyah whispered. She whispered about how things were fine, she was fine, the house was fine, her roommate was, and then she paused. "He's not annoying anymore," she whispered. "And I don't know what to do with that." Nia's response was immediate and did not require volume because it had force. "Aaliyah Monroe, don't. You like the Mafia man. He is a former. You like him. I appreciate his cooking, which is a completely separate. Girl. Nia, I will hang up." She hung up. She turned around. J1 was standing in the hallway with a cup of tea. He had the expression of a man who had heard everything, understood everything, and had made a decision, as a gift to her, as an act of genuine consideration, to say absolutely nothing about any of it. He held out the tea. She took it. Her face was doing something she couldn't manage, and she was aware of this and completely unable to stop it. "Not a word," she said. "Good night, Aaliyah," he said, and walked back down the hallway toward his room. She heard it just before he turned the corner. Faint, brief, private, almost imperceptible. The sound of someone laughing quietly, the way a laugh escapes when you're trying to keep it in and it finds a way out anyway because it's too real to contain. She stood in the hallway. The cup was warm in her hands. Her whole face was doing something she was going to think about later, much later when she was ready, and she stood there for a long time before she went to bed. The identity documents arrived in week 5, delivered by Kowalski with the energy of a man completing an administrative task he had long since stopped finding meaningful. Her new name was Karen Mitchell. She was apparently from Dayton, Ohio. She looked at the document for a full 10 seconds. Then she looked at Kowalski. "Karen," she said. "It's just a name. Karen Mitchell from Dayton, Ohio." She set the document down with the careful precision of someone placing an explosive on a table. "I went to college. I have a 401k. I survived a whole situation and I come out of it as a Karen from Dayton. Ms. Monroe, what is his name?" J1 opened his document with no particular expression. "David Park," he said. The room was quiet for a moment. "David," she said. "He gets David and I get Karen." J1 looked at the document, looked at her. There was a beat of absolute stillness. "Hello," he said. "I am David. Don't." He looked at Kowalski. The look was precise and clear and had the quality of a statement that had been made without any particular drama but was not going to be reversed. "I think she needs a different name," he said. "The system generates them randomly." "Generate again," he said. Kowalski looked at this man. He thought about who this man had been 18 months ago. He thought about the files he had read. He thought about 12 years and 3 countries and operations that were described in federal documents with words that were professionally neutral and personally alarming. He generated again. The printer made its small domestic noise. The new document said Karen Williams. The room was silent. Aaliyah turned to look at J1 very slowly. He looked at the document. He looked at her. Something shifted on his face. A genuine expression, rare and unguarded. And for once it was not stillness. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time she had ever heard him say that about something that had nothing to do with the kitchen. She laughed. The real kind surprised out of her. And the name Karen Williams became, in that moment, not a loss but a story. Something that had happened to her and J10 on a Tuesday in an FBI safe house in Akron, Ohio, which meant it was hers. Which meant Karen Williams never really existed. Aaliyah Monroe had been there instead. Eventually, through an argument with 3 separate federal agents and a written complaint that Kowalski described to his wife as the most legally formatted grievance he had ever received in 26 years of federal service, she became Zara Collins. But that came later. Week 6 arrived with a new quality that neither of them named. The trial date had been confirmed. 12 days. Kowalski had delivered the information with his usual tone of mild weather and left before the weight of the number had time to fully settle in the room. They ate dinner that evening without arguing about anything in particular. Aaliyah set the table without being asked, for the first time since she'd arrived. Jae-won cooked something that took longer than usual, with more care than the occasion seemed to require. Neither of them commented on either of these things. 12 days had a number now. The number was small. Week 6, Tuesday, 11 o'clock at night. Aaliyah was in the bathroom brushing her teeth. She was thinking about nothing in particular, the trial, the timeline, the name Zara Collins, which she was still getting used to in the abstract, the way Portland was apparently a city she was going to live in starting in approximately 2 weeks. She was not thinking about the spider until the spider was there. It was on the wall above the towel rack. It was not small. It was the kind of spider that communicated intent. It had the quality of something that had been waiting. She stood very still. She looked at it. It appeared to look back. She was not afraid of spiders as a category. She had made this clear to herself on multiple occasions. She was afraid of this particular spider, which was different, because this particular spider was clearly not operating within the normal parameters of spider behavior and the distinction mattered. She handled it the way the situation called for. J1. Silence from down the hall. The particular silence of someone who is either asleep or has decided to be asleep as a strategic position. J10, I know you are awake. His door opened. Footsteps. Measured and unhurried. The footsteps of someone who had decided that whatever this was, it was not a threat requiring urgency, and was now on his way to confirm this assessment. He appeared in the hallway in sweatpants and a white t-shirt, looking like a man who had been entirely asleep and was prepared to carry a specific grievance about this moment for a considerable amount of time. What happened? He said. Flat. Informational. There's a situation, she said, pointing at the bathroom door. A situation. In the bathroom. It has 8 legs and it is looking at me with intention. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man recalibrating the conversation he had expected to be having. You woke me up for a spider, he said. It is not a regular. Aaliyah. It looked at me, J1. He walked past her into the bathroom. She heard nothing for approximately 4 seconds, which was either very fast or the spider had done something and she was not going to think about which. He came back out with a cup and a piece of paper and walked to the window at the end of the hallway and released whatever was in the cup outside. He did all of this with the quiet competence of someone for whom this was, without any question, the least dangerous thing he had done in the last decade. Done, he said. He turned around. The hallway was narrow. Aaliyah had stepped back when he came out of the bathroom and had not calculated the distance correctly and was standing approximately 4 inches from his face. This was not intentional. It was the architecture. Neither of them moved. It was 11 o'clock at night and the house was completely quiet and he still looked half asleep and she was 4 inches from his face in a government hallway in Akron, Ohio, and she did not have an exit strategy and she was not, at this precise moment, looking for one. The spider is gone, he said, very quietly. Yeah, she said, the same volume. Are you okay? You're not moving. I'm aware of that. A beat. The long kind. The kind the story had been building toward since a bowl of soup slid across a counter on day 6. Aaliyah, don't say something smooth right now. I cannot handle that. I wasn't going to say something smooth. What were you going to say? A pause. He looked at her with something she didn't have a word for yet. That you have toothpaste on your chin, he said. She stepped back. Her hand went to her chin. There was toothpaste. Oh my God. And then he laughed. Not the private small escaped laugh from the hallway. The real one. Warm and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh that comes out when something is genuinely funny and the person has stopped managing how they seem. She had not heard this laugh before. It rearranged something in her. It's not funny. It's a little funny, he said, still laughing. J.E.1. Good night, Aaliyah, he said, and walked back to his room. And she could hear the laughter continuing even after the door wasn't quite closed, private and genuine and warm. And she stood in the hallway wiping toothpaste off her chin and her face was doing the thing again. The unmanaged thing. The smile that arrived without permission and refused to leave. She turned off the light. She went to bed. She was in enormous trouble, and she had known it for at least 3 weeks, and the toothpaste had not helped. Week 7. Thursday. The storm had been threatening all day. The power went out at 9 in the evening. Kowalski was in Cleveland, unreachable as a policy. It was just them and the candles from the drawer and takeout from the one restaurant that delivered in weather like this, and the house felt smaller in the dark the way houses do, the walls closer, the rooms warmer, the distance between two people in the same room shorter than it had any right to be. They ended up on the living room floor with the containers between them and one candle doing its best. Jae-won had produced a deck of cards from somewhere and was teaching her a Korean card game with rules she could not fully grasp and outcomes she could not stop losing. "This game is designed for me to lose," she said. "The game is the same for both players," he said. "Then why are you winning?" "Because I'm better at this." She stared at him. There was something about the way he said things, without performance, without softening, just the flat, honest fact of it, that she had started to find not infuriating but something else. Something that didn't have a safe name yet. "The audacity," she said. "You said you wanted to learn," he said, dealing again. "I wanted to win." "Those are different goals," he said. She lost again. She put her cards down. She looked at him across the candle with the expression of a woman who had made a decision she was going to either be very glad about or completely attribute to the power outage, depending on how things went. "Can I ask you something real?" she said. He set his cards down. No hesitation. "Yes," he said. "When this is over. When you're David Park from wherever." She stopped. Started again. "What does your actual day look like?" "Like Tuesday. A regular Tuesday." He thought about it. Not performing thought, actually thinking. The way someone thinks when nobody has asked them this before and the question is locating something they kept private even from themselves. "I wake up early," he said. "I cook. Real groceries from a market. Not a government-funded refrigerator. Obviously," she said and smiled. "I find work that uses numbers. Legitimate. Consulting, maybe. I read in the evenings. That's it. That's everything." She was quiet for a moment. "That sounds really nice," she said, and she meant it completely. "What about yours?" he said. "My Tuesday." "Yes." She looked at the candle. She looked at the dark around it. She let herself be honest in the way she had been learning, slowly, over 7 weeks, in a house she hadn't chosen with a person she hadn't planned for. "Honestly, I don't know anymore. I had this whole plan. Career, apartment, timeline. Very organized. Very Aaliyah." She paused. "And somewhere between seeing what I saw and ending up here eating soup at 6 in the morning, the plan stopped feeling like mine." "What does it feel like now?" he said. "Like maybe I built it for someone I was supposed to be. Not someone I actually am." The candle held the silence for a moment. "I think you are the most yourself at 6:35 in the morning," he said. "Before you remember to manage everything." She looked at him. Something moved through her chest. Not pain, not joy, something that was both of those things simultaneously. The feeling of being seen precisely, in the specific way she had spent her whole life hoping for and working hard not to need. "Why are you like this?" she said. "Like what?" You say things. Out of nowhere. Real things. Would you prefer I didn't?" A long pause. "No," she said. The candle did its work. "J1, she said. "I need you to understand that if you have feelings you need to use your words right now because I am not going to assume and then be wrong and have to live with that." "I have feelings," he said. "Words. Specific words. I just used words. More words." He leaned forward. He held her face in both hands with the careful, deliberate tenderness of a man handling something he had been careful with for a long time and was done pretending he wasn't. "I have been trying very hard," he said quietly, "not to make your situation more complicated." "How's that going?" she said, barely breathing. "Not well," he said, and there it was. The almost smile, rare and devastating. They testified, both of them, in separate sessions with separate attorneys, in a federal courthouse that smelled like institutional carpet and consequence. Aaliyah went first. She sat in a chair and answered questions in organized, precise chronological order because she was an accountant and that was how her mind worked, and she looked at the people across from her and she told them everything she had seen, everything she knew, all of it, with the clear-eyed steadiness of someone who had decided a long time ago. In a bathroom in Atlanta, looking at her own reflection, saying okay 11 times, that she was going to do the right thing regardless of what it cost. Jae-won went second. He sat in the same chair and answered questions with the unshakable calm of a man who had been in rooms considerably more dangerous than a courtroom and had survived all of them. He told them about the network, the connections, the specific infrastructure of an operation that the FBI had been trying to map for years. He told them everything in the same spirit he had operated for 12 years, with precision and without waste. What neither of them had fully understood was the size of what they were pulling on. The councilman was a thread, and when both their testimonies were laid side by side, the Atlanta end and the Seoul end and the years of financial architecture in between, the thread became a rope, and the rope was attached to something much larger, a network that ran through 3 cities and 2 countries and had been operating in plain sight for the better part of a decade. The case cracked open in ways that made the news. Not their names, those were protected. But the shape of what they had helped expose was public, and it was large, and it would run for 2 more years through additional trials and additional testimonies and the slow, grinding machinery of federal prosecution. They didn't know the full extent of it yet. What they knew was that it was done. Their part. The part that had required them to live in a beige duplex in Akron, Ohio, and be accidentally, unavoidably, irrevocably honest with each other until something neither of them planned had become the most real thing in either of their lives. They got their new names. Jae-won signed as David Park. Aaliyah signed as Zara Collins, having won that battle through documentation and a written complaint that Kowalski, on his last week before retirement, had submitted on her behalf with the quiet dignity of a man doing one final meaningful thing. They were given their separate assignments. Different cities. Standard protocol. In the car, on the way to separate destinations, Kowalski driving Aaliyah to the airport, she looked out the window at Akron, passing by, ordinary, beige, completely unremarkable, the city she had not chosen and would never have chosen, and that had given her something she hadn't known to look for. She didn't cry. She had done the accounting on this already. She knew what it was worth. She knew what she was carrying. She also knew who Jae-won was underneath everything. Not the syndicate, not the FBI file, not the careful stillness and the precise English and the opinions about ramen. The man who waited until she was ready. The man who made the tea and never asked for credit. The man who held her face like something valuable and said the most honest sentence she had ever been on the receiving end of with a complete absence of performance. She carried that into Portland. Zara Collins opened a small financial consulting practice in Portland and reorganized it 3 times before the first client walked through the door. The third configuration was the right one. She knew because she stopped wanting to change it. She built a Tuesday. A real one. The kind that belonged to the person she actually was rather than the person she had planned to be. Coffee from a place 2 blocks away that took it seriously. A morning walk that had no destination. Work she was good at with people she had chosen. An evening that belonged to her completely. It was good. It was genuinely, surprisingly, fully good. She was on her 3rd Tuesday. Just a Tuesday? Nothing particular. Groceries bought and put away. Afternoon light coming through the window of her new apartment. When someone knocked on the door. She opened it. Jae-won was standing in the doorway in a jacket she had not seen before, holding 2 containers of doenjang jjigae that were still warm. He looked exactly like himself. Still precise, taking up exactly the space he needed and no more. He looked like a man who had done an enormous amount of research before choosing a city, which is exactly what he had done. She stared at him. How did you? Kowalski, he said. Kowalski is going to lose his. He retired last month, Jae-won said. He told me, and I am quoting, "Life is too short, son." She looked at him. She looked at the soup. She looked at him again. Something in her chest was doing the thing it had been doing for weeks in a beige house in Akron and had not stopped doing since, the unmanaged thing, the thing that arrived without permission and left whenever it wanted. You can't just show up at my witness protection address, she said. Former, he said. We're civilians now. That is such a technicality. He held up the soup. Just slightly. The way you offer something you know the answer to already. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she said, the thermostat goes to 73. 71, he said, already stepping inside. 73 or you can go back to 72. She stood there. She looked at this man. David Park, apparently from Portland, who had made jollof rice in Akron and laughed in a hallway and held her face in both hands and told her the truest thing anyone had ever told her about herself. This man who had waited and then done the math and moved to Portland. Fine, she said. 72. She closed the door. They sat on the floor of her new apartment, her real floor in her actual life in the Tuesday she had built, and he opened the containers and she ate and he dealt out a hand of cards she was going to lose. The thermostat said 72. Nobody touched it. There was a sticky note on it by morning, placed there by J1 at some point in the evening with the quiet deliberateness of everything he had ever done for her without announcement. Said one word, one number, 72. No argument, no name, just the number, the compromise, the temperature of a life chosen together. This is what Room 4B is really about. It is about two people who were extraordinary at surviving and completely unprepared for living, discovering, in the most manufactured, accidental, bureaucratically arranged circumstances imaginable, that the thing they had been missing was not a plan. It was a person who knew their 6:35 in the morning face and showed up anyway. It is about the difference between the life you design and the life that finds you when you stop defending yourself against it. Aaliyah built a plan for someone she was supposed to become. The bathroom she never found dismantled it. What grew in the wreckage was realer than anything on the spreadsheet. It is about the way intimacy does not arrive with music. It arrives in increments. A bowl of soup. A cup of tea placed without comment next to someone sitting in the dark. A spider removed with a cup and a piece of paper by someone who has faced considerably worse. It accumulates until one day you look up and realize you already know this person better than you plan to know anyone. It is about identity, the discovery that who you are is not the job title or the 5-year plan or even the name on the document. It is who you are at 6:35 in the morning before you remember to manage everything. That person was always there. Sometimes it takes a beige duplex in Akron and a thermostat argument to introduce you to them. And it is about the bravery of ordinary love. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet, specific, completely undeniable kind that shows up at your door in Portland with warm soup and negotiates a temperature and deals you into a card game you will lose and stays. Aaliyah Monroe was right about one thing in the dark on the night of the power outage. Nobody knew she was brave, but J10 knew. He knew from the night she sat down and ate the soup without being asked. He knew from the sticky notes and the imaginary camera and the laugh that came out half tears on a night when the candle was the only light. He knew, and he moved to Portland. That is enough. That was always enough. Thank you for spending an hour in Room 4B. Thank you for staying through the thermostat and the soup and the toothpaste in the hallway and the storm. Thank you for caring about two people who didn't know they needed each other until they were too close not to. If this story sat with you, if some part of it felt true in a way that belongs to you personally, leave a comment. One word. Whatever it gave you. And if there is someone in your life who needed to hear this story today, send it to them now while you're still feeling it. The thermostat is at 72. Nobody touched it. See you in the next one.